Hey folks, today we are going to be looking at the MSI Vigor GK50 Elite, which is a new RGB mechanical keyboard that's coming in around £80 here in the UK. And along with that, MSI has also sent in the WR01 Wrist Rest, which retails separately for £20, and we'll be taking a look at both today. So the Vigor GK50 Elite comes in two flavors, and that gives you an option of which switch you want beneath your keycaps. Now, both of them are a Clicky type, but you get the GK50 Elite Blue, and then there's the Elite Box White edition. The blue one has very similar specs to what you'd get with a Cherry MX switch, and the Box White one has a Clicky switch with a shorter travel designed to actuate faster. Now, the switches are made by Kailh rather than Cherry, but MSI isn't shying away from this fact like companies once used to, and I think this is a good sign for the Kailh brand. It shows that they're becoming a bit more trusted. So the Kailh box white switches, which you can see under here, they have a 50-gram actuation force, a 1.8mm actuation distance, and a total travel of 3.6mm. As you can see here, they have the same cross-shaped stem as Cherry switches, and this means that aftermarket keycaps will be compatible with both types. So the housing on these switches is clear, and of course this is to allow light from the surface-mounted RGB LED to dissipate and shine through as much of the switch and the keycaps as possible. It's actually also got an IP56 water and dust resistance rating, but that doesn't apply to the keyboard itself, so I wouldn't be spilling your drinks on it anytime soon. Inside the switch itself, Kailh is using a click bar design, which is different to how Cherry MX achieves the classic clicking, but we'll get to how good it is a little later in the review. So inside the keyboard box, you do not get the wrist rest, as again, that is sold separately, but you do get a Keycap Puller. Now obviously the arrow keys are quite easy to remove just with your hands, but if you happen to drop some Doritos within these keycaps, the Keycap Puller can help you get down and clean where you need to. It's quite a standard inclusion. And as well as that, you also get a couple of replacement keycaps, which are here. And these are raised versions of the Control and Alt switches to make them a bit more obvious, maybe coming in use in a few games or something like that. So the keyboard itself, as you can see, of course, is a full-size keyboard, which means you get the full set of numpad, the navigation keys, the arrow keys, etc. So this makes it quite large by its nature, but MSI has done a good job in keeping the dimensions around those keys pretty slim. I mean, there's not much bulk on any of the edges, which is always good to see. And in terms of design, the base is quite plasticky. It's not the best build quality I've ever seen, but it is still quite sturdy. And this is aided by the aluminium alloy top plate, which also has a nice brushed effect, as well as the little dragon just wrapping around the arrow keys there. It is quite a smart looking keyboard. I think the keycaps do change that a little bit. It's the keycaps that kind of give it that real gamer feel, which is definitely what MSI is going for. And by that, I mean they've got an octagon design on the keycaps, which gives you angles in every corner. And the font itself just screams gamer as well. But that's clearly what MSI is going for. I don't personally like it, but you may disagree. That's your choice. So flipping over the keyboard, we can see that the 1.8-meter USB cable has a nice braiding, but it is fixed, so it's a non-detachable cable. And we can also see on the underside the nice amount of rubber that MSI has used. You've got 4 rubber pads along the front edge, and then the legs at the back, these have a rubber coating as well, and that applies whether they are folded down or flicked out. So the keyboard has a good grip in both orientations, and that's something that's always good to see. Like most gaming keyboards, the MSI GK50 Elite has secondary functions which are enabled using this dragon style key down here. This functions as the FN key from typical designs. And using this, you can use these top keys up here to control media playback and volume. And you can use the navigation and arrow keys to control things with LED, such as the mode. And you also get access to brightness, speed, and color. Whatever you think of how the keycaps look, MSI has done a very good job when it comes to their usability. The size and the spacing makes them very comfortable and natural to use, and they're also attached to the switches in a very sturdy way. You don't get any of that annoying wobble that you can get on some other cheaper models. When it comes to switches, it is of course down to personal preference. Now my preference is tactile or linear. I don't tend to get on that well with traditional clicky keyboards. So I must say I was pretty surprised by how well I got on with this one. looking more closely into the design of the switch, I found out that the actuation mechanism is actually linear, so maybe it's not all that surprising. Now, the linear actuation mechanism is tied to a small clicking bar, which the switch brushes past as it moves, and this gives it the noise and also a small tactile bump. It's very subtle, but it is definitely there. It's not a pure linear switch. For me, as I've implied, this is an improvement over a traditional clicky board. I really like the responsiveness. I don't think the clickiness interferes too much with the action, and I also like the subtle tactile bump. But your mileage may vary, and there are one or two issues to be aware of with the design of this switch itself. The first of these is very minor. It's basically just the fact that the clicking bar activates on the down press and also on the return. So you get a double click every time you actuate and reset the switch. On a traditional board, it's one click. So if you're a purist, you're probably not going to like it. For everyone else, you may enjoy the additional clicking sound. I mean, that's partly why you buy the keyboard anyway. The second issue is perhaps a little more pertinent because the design means that it is technically possible to click the switch without getting the actuation. There's a very, very subtle difference in the force needed for the two of them, and there's a very slim chance that your hit may be that force. Now, I must say that in typical use when I was gaming or typing on this keyboard, I didn't notice it happen, but with a controlled press, it can be done. So it's definitely possible that from time to time, you may get a missed click. But like I said, it didn't happen to me, it probably won't happen to you, but it is a possibility that you should be aware of. While the Vigor GK50 Elite may not have a traditional clicky switch, it certainly still has the traditional loudness that comes with them. And so this is something to be aware of. If you happen to sit in an office next to people that are going to be annoyed by that, then definitely consider that. I mean, is anyone even working in an office these days? I don't know. And it's designed as a gaming keyboard. Chances are you're going to have it in your bedroom or at your gaming station by itself, in which case it's fine. But the loudness can annoy neighbors, so do be aware of that. Moving on to the Rgb lighting, this is customizable on a per key basis. You will need some software to trigger the individual keys themselves, but there are plenty of modes, colors and speeds and everything to play around with just on the keyboard itself. Now at full brightness, the lighting is very vivid and you have 6 brightness levels to play with, including off, and the vividness is aided by many parts of the design. It's not just having bright LEDs. For example, you have a slightly reflective metal surface. You've got the space in between the keys, you've got the clear housing and the raised keycaps all contribute to the light coming nicely through those middle spaces. So speaking of the software, what you're going to be using is Dragon Center, and for the keyboard it has 2 main menus, the first of which is Mystic Light, and most of you will probably know that this is MSI's RGB ecosystem, and so if we had more MSI RGB products, they would also be listed here, but we've just got the one, so it's the keyboard only. And it's a fairly intuitive menu, nice and easy to change the effects, and you've got 3 profiles to play with. Now on profile 2, we've got it set to the customize one, and we can apply it. And this is just essentially the per key RGB lighting that I was telling you about. You can pick your colors, choose which keys are then going to be applied in that color, and then apply it, and it's as simple as that. It's a nice static pattern, and then you've also got, for your third profile, for example, you've also got multiple other ones to play with. Whirlpool is quite an interesting one, if that's your thing. It's super RGB. But yep, it's super easy to change everything. The software works well, and it's fast on the lighting changing. The second section of the software is separate to Mystic Light, and it comes under Gaming Gear, which we'll show you here. And so from there, you can select your keyboard, and then you then get a separate menu specifically to program macros into the keyboard, so separate from the lighting. Confusingly, this also has a drop-down menu with 3 profiles to select from, and this is one of my biggest bugbears with this keyboard because these are actually hardware profiles, as in if you program some macros, save them to the keyboard, you can then exit the software and the macros will still be on the keyboard available to use, which isn't always the case. So it makes no sense that the only way you can change the profiles between the 3 options is to open the software, change them in the drop-down menu, and then exit the software if software is not something that you don't want to use. It's a really, really strange thing, and we've been through the keyboard, we've been through all the shortcuts, we can't seem to find a way to do it on the keyboard itself, I think this is a big oversight, and I hope that MSI can release a firmware update to maybe use the Dragon Key plus numbers 1, 2, and 3, for example, to change the profiles, but that remains to be seen. For now, it's definitely an oversight and a bit of a weakness in my opinion. Thankfully, the macro recording process once the software is open is nice and straightforward. Everything is simple and works as you'd expect. You simply click on the key that you want, hit the record button, type your keys, and click stop, hit apply, and that macro is now saved to that key. The key map doesn't make it obvious which macros you've got where. Again, that's something that can be fixed in an update, but by and large, the functionality is there. However, I do really wish there was a way to switch between your profiles using the keyboard itself and not just the software. So that wraps up everything in terms of hardware and software with the keyboard, but of course we were also sent the Vigor WR01 Wrist Rest, which is here, and as I said, it's £20. Strikes me as a little bit expensive, but I must admit it is a very comfortable and appealing wrist rest once you actually start to use it. First of all, there's plenty of grip on the underside. This thing isn't going anywhere. And then on the upper side, you have a really soft and lovely surface to rest against. It's got a slight incline, which fits the sort of natural typing pose. And then the memory foam is infused with cooling gel. I mean, it sounds a bit marketing nonsense, but it is quite cool and comfortable to rest against, so I can't complain. And honestly, if I didn't have a wrist rest, 20 quid for this is pretty good. To wrap things up, I think MSI's Vigor GK50 Elite is a fairly competitive offering. £80 is a pretty good price considering that it's fully mechanical, it has RGB lighting, including per key customization, and you get 3 hardware profiles with macro customization thrown in as well. The switches also impress, and that's speaking as someone who doesn't tend to like clicky keyboards. I do quite like these ones, and it's good to see companies not shying away from the fact that they're using Kailh. Now, as we've been over, there are some missed opportunities and the software could do with some work here and there. But aside from those things, if the gamer aesthetic has caught your eye and you like what you see, there isn't really anything else to prevent us recommending it. £80 is a pretty fair price for what you get. And to be honest, the same is true for the wrist rest, even though it is a bit more on the premium side. So that's it from us today. Let us know what you thought in the comments, and thanks for watching.